Real crazy, bro. Her, Diddy, and 4, 5, 6 other guys, or just her, Diddy, another guy. See? And they tell off on their story. They sell it.
Let's start with a man named Gene Deal. Back in the 1990s, Gene wasn't just some random guy on the street. He worked as a bodyguard for some of the biggest names in hip-hop. He was close to the action, always around famous rappers, celebrities, and powerful music executives. And because of that, he says he saw things most people never did, now comma. When people talk about Tupac's death, the name that comes up again and again is Diddy, also known as Puff Daddy or Sean Combs. For years, there have been rumors that Diddy had something to do with the shooting in Las Vegas that took Tupac's life. Some say he ordered it, some say he paid for it, and others think he was behind the whole plan. But Gene Deal tells a different story. According to him, Diddy wasn't the mastermind at all. He wasn't the top guy pulling the strings. In fact, Deal says Diddy was more like a pawn in a much bigger game. He describes Diddy as someone who was being used by people with way more money, way more power, and way more control. Think of it like this. In chess, the pawn is the piece that gets moved around the most. It can be sacrificed. It doesn't call the shots. That's how Gene Deal describes Diddy's role. To him, Diddy wasn't the one truly in charge. He was just the loud, flashy, and famous face that the real power players could hide behind. Deal even says that when it comes to Tupac's death, it wasn't street gangs or random violence that caused it. He believes it was organized from the top, a planned event by people sitting in boardrooms, not on street corners. These were the financiers and fixers, the kind of powerful men who stay behind the scenes. They use artists like pieces on a board. And when the time comes, they can turn those artists into legends or martyrs if it benefits them. What makes this claim so shocking is how confidently Deal speaks about it. He doesn't whisper. He doesn't seem afraid anymore. He talks like someone who has carried this secret for years and doesn't care what happens if he tells the truth. To him, Diddy wasn't an executioner. He wasn't the one making the final decision. Instead, he was an errand boy, carrying out tasks for people who could destroy anyone in a heartbeat. So when we hear Gene Deal's story, it changes the way we look at the whole situation. Instead of blaming one man, it makes us wonder if the real power was hidden much higher up. If Deal is telling the truth, then Diddy might not be the puppet master. He might be the puppet. Now let's talk about something that has kept fans of Tupac guessing for decades, the 7-day theory. Here's what happened. Tupac was shot in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996. He fought for his life in the hospital for 6 days, and then on September 13th, he was pronounced dead. That's exactly 7 days from the night of the shooting to the day he passed. Why does that matter? Because Tupac's final album, released under the name Machiavelli, was called The Don Killuminati, the 7-day theory. That timing was way too perfect for some people to believe it was just a coincidence. Instead, many fans saw it as a prophecy, almost like Tupac had predicted his own fate. The album itself only made the mystery stronger. It came out 2 months after he died, and the cover art showed Tupac as if he were being crucified, like a symbol of sacrifice. The messages inside the album, the way the songs were arranged, and even the little details in the booklet all felt like clues. Fans started to believe Tupac left behind a secret code. Here's where it gets even stranger. The name Machiavelli comes from Niccolò Machiavelli, an Italian thinker from the 1500s. Machiavelli once wrote that if you want to defeat your enemies, one of the best strategies is to fake your own death. And what did Tupac do? He released an album under that very name, full of references to life after death, resurrection, and survival. Some fans even noticed that if you rearrange the letters in Machiavelli, you can spell out "Am Alive K." To believers, that wasn't an accident. It was a hidden message. And then there are the little details around his death that fuel the theory. For example, the autopsy report listed Tupac as being taller and heavier than he actually was. His body was supposedly cremated only 1 day later, which is extremely fast. The man who performed the cremation reportedly retired right after, adding more suspicion. To fans, all of this was way too neat, too perfect, and too suspicious. It didn't look like chaos, it looked like a plan. So the 7-day theory became more than just an album title. It became a symbol, a mystery, and maybe even a clue that Tupac wasn't gone at all. Some believe it was his way of telling the world that he had to vanish, that he had to escape, and that he left behind the signs for anyone smart enough to notice. Another piece of this mystery that fans can't stop talking about is what supposedly happened inside the Las Vegas hospital after Tupac was shot. Here's what the official story says. Tupac was taken to the hospital, he stayed there for 6 days, and then he passed away. But many people believe that what really happened inside those hospital walls was not what we were told. One of the biggest rumors is called the body swap theory. According to this story, the real Tupac wasn't the one who died in that hospital bed. Instead, supporters of this theory believe there was a switch. Another body was used to play the role of Tupac while the real one was secretly taken away. Why do people think this? Well, a few strange details make the story sound possible. First, the coroner's report listed Tupac's height and weight incorrectly. The numbers were higher than his real measurements. Fans saw this as a sign that maybe it wasn't actually him. The cremation happened incredibly fast, within 24 hours. Normally, a process like that takes more time, especially when the death is part of a major police investigation. But in Tupac's case, it was rushed. Third, the man who handled the cremation supposedly retired immediately afterward, which just made things look even stranger. Put all of that together, and it paints a suspicious picture. It feels less like an accident and more like a carefully planned disappearance. People who believe in the body swap theory say that money was exchanged, silence was bought, and deals were made behind closed doors to make sure no one ever questioned it. They claim Tupac was smuggled out of the hospital in secret, while the public was distracted by the official story of his death. Now, does that sound wild? Absolutely. But think about it. Tupac had already taken on the name Machiavelli, a reference to a man who once wrote about faking your own death to beat your enemies. His final album, The 7-Day Theory, was packed with clues about life after death and coded messages, so when you add those hints to the suspicious hospital details, the theory doesn't seem so impossible anymore. In the end, the hospital story keeps the mystery alive. Now let's talk about one of the wildest theories of all, the idea that Tupac didn't die in 1996 at all. Instead, he escaped to Cuba. Here's where this story starts. Tupac had family ties to people who already had connections in Cuba. His aunt, Assata Shakur, had been living there for decades after being granted political asylum by Cuban leader Fidel Castro. So if Tupac wanted to disappear, there was already a safe path for him to take. According to some people, that's exactly what happened. One former security officer named Michael Neese claimed that he helped smuggle Tupac out of the hospital. He said that money was secretly paid to hospital staff, another body was swapped in to take Tupac's place, and then a private jet carried him out of the country. According to Neese, Tupac was even sitting as co-pilot on the plane, flying from the Caribbean to Cuba. And it's not just Michael Neese saying this. Over the years, there have been dozens of alleged sightings of Tupac in Havana, Cuba. Locals claimed they saw a man who looked exactly like him, walking through the streets with his head down, wearing sunglasses and smoking a cigar. Some photos even surfaced, though nobody knows for sure if they're real or fake. Then there's Suge Knight, the music executive who was in the car with Tupac the night of the shooting. In interviews, Suge has hinted that he doesn't believe Tupac is dead. He's even said things like, "Pac might be on an island somewhere, laughing at us." When you put it all together, the family connections, the mysterious flight, the quiet life in Havana, and even Suge's comments, the Cuba theory starts to sound less like a fantasy and more like a real possibility. For fans, this theory explains a lot of strange details. The rushed cremation, the missing witnesses, the weird mistakes in the official paperwork. It also matches Tupac's Machiavelli persona, the man who studied strategies about survival and disappearing when the heat was too high. Is Tupac really gone? Or is he living a quiet life somewhere in Havana, smoking cigars under the Caribbean sun, far away from the chaos that almost destroyed him? That's a question that keeps the mystery alive even decades later. Now, we can't talk about Tupac's story without talking about Diddy, also known as Puff Daddy or Sean Combs. For years, his name has been surrounded by rumors, accusations, and conspiracy theories about what really happened in Las Vegas in 1996. Some people have claimed that Diddy offered money, millions of dollars, to have Tupac and Suge Knight killed. These claims have shown up in sworn interviews, court transcripts, and even secret recordings. And every time his name comes up, it adds more fuel to the fire that Diddy might have played a major role in the events that changed hip-hop forever. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Former bodyguard Gene Deal, the same guy who said Diddy wasn't the mastermind, believes something different. He says Diddy was more like a puppet in a much bigger. Now, we can't talk about Tupac's story without talking about Diddy, also known as Puff Daddy or Sean Combs. For years, his name has been surrounded by rumors, accusations, and conspiracy theories about what really happened in Las Vegas in 1996. Some people have claimed that Diddy offered money, millions of dollars, to have Tupac and Suge Knight killed. These claims have shown up in sworn interviews, court transcripts, and even secret recordings. And every time his name comes up, it adds more fuel to the fire that Diddy might have played a major role in the events that changed hip-hop forever. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Former bodyguard Gene Deal, the same guy who said Diddy wasn't the mastermind, believes something different. He says Diddy was more like a puppet in a much bigger game. According to him, Diddy wasn't the one calling the shots. He was just the loud, flashy, famous face taking all the attention while the real power players stayed in the shadows. Think about it. Diddy was young, rich, and everywhere. His face was in music videos, on magazine covers, and at every party. If you needed someone to take the blame or distract the public, he was the perfect target. And while everyone was busy pointing fingers at him, the powerful people in the background, the ones Gene Deal calls the financiers and fixers, could stay hidden, controlling the game without anyone looking their way. Today, Diddy is facing his own scandals and legal battles, with people coming forward and accusing him of everything, from abuse to trafficking. But some fans wonder if history is repeating itself. Is Diddy really the mastermind behind all these events? Or is he just the fall guy, the person they throw under the bus to protect the real people pulling the strings? If what Gene Deal says is true, then Diddy wasn't the executioner back in 1996. He was just another errand boy doing what he was told, while the people with the real power, people we may never even know the names of, stayed safe, untouchable, and in control. And that's what keeps fans questioning everything. Was Diddy truly the villain? Or was he just another piece in a game that's been rigged from the start? Now, here's something that gives a lot of people chills. The pattern of silence that seems to follow this story everywhere, even decades later. Back in 1996, right after Tupac was rushed to the hospital in Las Vegas, there were nurses, doctors, and staff members who whispered things to reporters off the record. They hinted that things didn't add up, that there were strange details they couldn't explain. But then, all of a sudden, that whispering stopped. No one would go on camera, no one would talk publicly, and those who did, many of them later said they wished they hadn't. It was like an invisible hand reached out and told everyone to shut up. And it didn't stop in the 90s. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing the same exact thing happen with Diddy's current scandals. In one of the biggest cases against him, prosecutors admitted that one of the key accusers, the person they call Victim #3, suddenly vanished. She didn't just miss a meeting, she disappeared. No phone calls, no messages, not even her lawyer could be reached. She was just gone. Think about that. A witness with explosive information ready to testify, and then poof, gone from the map. That's not just a scheduling problem. That's pressure. And when you look at the Tupac case and Diddy's legal troubles side by side, the patterns are almost identical. Witnesses going silent just when they're needed. Most stories that never make it to court. Evidence that disappears or never comes out. Some people call it coincidence. Others call it choreography, a carefully planned way of controlling the story. Because when witnesses vanish or stay silent, the only version of the story left is the official version, the one that keeps the powerful people safe and keeps the truth buried. Fans who study these patterns believe this silence isn't random. They see it as proof that the same kind of power that might have helped Tupac vanish is still out there today, making sure the world never sees what's really going on. So here's the question. Are we really looking at a string of accidents? Or are we staring at the fingerprints of a machine that knows exactly how to make people disappear in 1996 and in 2025? At the heart of this story, there's one thing that never changes: money. Because no matter which theory you believe, almost everyone agrees that the Vegas shooting wasn't just about anger or street beef. It was about business. Here's what people have claimed. Diddy, back in the 90s, allegedly put out a bounty, a huge amount of money, for anyone who could take out Tupac and Suge Knight. Some say it was $1 million. Others say it was even more. But here's the thing. According to interviews and secret recordings, the people who were supposed to get paid for doing the job never got the money. Instead, insiders say the cash was pocketed by a middleman, a guy named Eric. Is it Martin? If that's true, it means the shooters didn't just get caught up in a violent moment. They were set up thinking they'd get rich, only to realize the payout was never coming. And that changes everything. If the money was fake, then the whole bounty wasn't really about paying someone. It was about creating chaos, turning gangs against each other, keeping the streets distracted, and making sure no one ever looked up the ladder to the real power players hiding in the boardrooms. Now think about today. Diddy is in legal trouble again, with multiple cases draining his money. Lawyers, court battles, settlements, millions are leaving his accounts every single month. Some people see this as the final step in the pattern, the noisy one taking all the heat while the silent power players stay untouched. And that's the part that scares people the most. Because if what Gene Deal and others are saying is true, Diddy may have been a loud and reckless man, but he was never the real boss. He was the fall guy, the distraction, while the ones who truly control the machine, the ones with the money, influence, and reach to make people vanish, stayed safe in the shadows. So ask yourself this: if they can fake a death, erase witnesses, and dangle millions they never intend to pay, then who's really in control? And if that machine still exists, how many more stories like Tupac's are out there waiting to be uncovered?